Welcome back everyone to another video from scriptingisfun.com. In this video we're going to be looking at adding some graphical parts to our inventory system that we were playing with before, and we'll talk about some alternative inventory systems as well. In the videos before on inventory, we had set up on our skeleton here an inventory script that can hold up to 10 different items. And then in the script we looked at how we could add those items. We had an add item, we had a way to find an item if we needed to find one, remove an item when we used it. So what we're going to do today is we're going to add some graphical pieces to it. So when we hit play, on the top of our screen we have an inventory that if we hover over it, it'll slide down and it'll give us the 10 different slots for our inventory. When our player walks up to an item and picks it up, that item will end up here in our inventory. Like the key is right there. If I walk up here to the potion and pick it up, the potion goes into the next slot, so forth and so on. So we're going to take a look at how to do something like this in this video. So I'm going to go back into Unity here, and I've got an inventory canvas I set this up in. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. That's the finished one, and we'll start a new one so I can take you step by step through the process. Alright, so the first thing you need to do is you need to make yourself a canvas or add to your existing canvas the inventory panel. So I'm just going to make a new canvas here. Just right click in the hierarchy screen, go to UI. Let's make a new canvas, and you can have multiple canvases in a scene, that's not a problem. I'm going to rename this as our inventory canvas, and I already have something called inventory canvas, so I'll have to make this something different, so we'll just call this inventory canvas 2. Alright, in my canvas settings over here, I'm going to make sure that I'm in screen space overlay. That just overlays the entire screen with this canvas, so I don't need to change anything on the canvas itself. If you zoom way out in your scene view, you'll see here's your canvas. A lot of people get thrown off by the fact that the canvas is drawn to the side and it's so large, but actually when the game runs, this canvas will fit itself to whatever size your camera is in your game, so it'll exactly fit your screen. You also want to make sure that when you're working with the canvas, that in your game tab you got the right resolution selected for your finished game. So I'm just working in standalone, which is 1024 by 768, so that'll automatically size my game window and my camera and canvas to this size. If I change this like 16 by 9, you notice how it changed the shape here and also the shape in my game view. So depending on whichever one you're working in, you want to make sure you set your display mode correctly so that you can get this to look right in your finished game. Alright, now that we have the canvas, what we want to do is add in a spot to store those pictures of what's in your inventory. So to the canvas, just going to right click it, go to UI. What I did was I added a panel as kind of a holder for the different images. And again, when you make a panel, it's going to default to stretch the whole entire screen. So over here in the inspector you see that it's set to stretch. So I just actually I'm going to change the anchor point. Now the one that I showed you, I had it anchored to the top of the screen. You could anchor it to the side or the bottom. You can kind of decide where you want your inventory screen to sit, some of where it's going to be out of the way of normal gameplay and such. So I'm going to just go ahead and anchor it to the top center, and then I can come in here and I can grab the panel and I can just drag it up a little bit smaller. Now I want my images to be 50 pixels by 50 pixels, so that means in the width and height here, I want the height on my panel here to be able to handle just one row of images at 50 high, and I want a little padding around that. So let's go with something like maybe a 70 for height of my panel, and then if we zoom in here a little bit, we can see that the panel is now kind of coming off the bottom of the, or there's a little padding here. I'm just going to go ahead and drag that up a bit what I kind of want to do here is make this panel so that I can slide it in and out. But I'm going to dock it to the top of the screen. So now I've got a panel that's as wide as my screen and is at the top. It's a bar that fills the whole top. You can go in here and change this color if you want to a different color, whatever color you want your inventory screen to be. You can do that depending on your color scheme of your game. I think I'm just going to stick with some sort of a gray here. Something like this maybe. And again, you can affect the transparency too. If you want your inventory panel to not be see-through, you can drag the alpha all the way over, or you can just drag it back down so it's somewhat see-through so you can still see what's beneath your game. Alright, let's name this panel here. We're going to rename this as my inventory panel. And then what I need to do is have the individual buttons here, and you can do this a couple of ways. If you just want to display, you could use images. If you want these to be clickable, which maybe you can use things right from your inventory, then you can use buttons, and then you have the built-in clickable things already attached. So let's make a button for our inventory panel here. So I'm going to right click the inventory panel to add an element to it. I'm going to go to UI and I'm going to get a button. And let's get one of these buttons set up the way we want it to, and then we'll make duplicates of that and arrange them in this bar here so that they fit. So I know that I want my button to be square. I want it to be 50 wide and 50 high. Of course, you can make these whatever size you want, but 50 wide, 50 high is what we're looking at. And we may or may not want the text here on the button. There's this text element. If you decide you don't want any text on your button, you can delete that, or you can just take out the placeholder text in there and it'll go away. We can look to see what kind of a color we want, but I would recommend keeping it white, because what we're going to end up doing is swapping the sprite that's being displayed out with the sprite for the item that we're displaying. So if you change this color here, it'll actually tint all of your sprites when they come in. So I just recommend leaving that white for now. So we've got our button the right size. We've got it set to anchor to the center, which is fine. That way it'll stay centered on our bar here. And then what we want to do now is make more of these buttons. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do to make life a little easier is I'm going to put in a little bit of a layout group here so that the Unity can automatically just lay these buttons out as I put them in. So to do that, if I go to the panel, I can go here to add component, and I can go to layout, and there's these different layout groups, and I want these buttons to lay out horizontal next to each other, so I'm going to pick a horizontal layout group. And you notice right away it moved my button over to the top left corner of the bar, because this horizontal layout group now is controlling how things get laid across this panel. So in the inspector, we have the group, we have the ability to set some different padding and spacing in. We also can tell it how to align children. Now right now it's aligning upper left. I actually want it to align with middle center. I want it to lay these out and center them on the screen. So that moved this one guy back over to the middle here. Alright? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just, now that I've got my first button made, I'm going to go ahead and number these so that they're easy to remember. So this is button 1 for my first inventory slot. And then I'm going to right click it and duplicate it. And you notice when I put another one in, it centered them around the middle of this group. Okay? So it's got these two centered and spaced apart. As I add more, so just duplicate, duplicate, as I duplicate these, each time it's rearranging them. So I want 10 of these because I have 10 slots in my backpack, in my inventory here, so that's 8. Okay, so now I've got 10 of these, and you notice it spaced them all out across the top of my screen. Now if you don't like the spacing, or if you want to kind of shrink this in a bit, now that we know how much space we need, I could come back to my panel, And I could change its width down to maybe, let's say 900. So you can actually go in here and kind of tweak this a little bit and make it smaller, or move the panel off to the side or whatever, but I think I'll just leave it there about 900, and I've got 10 different buttons here all ready to go. So let's go here and just rename these buttons. So this is going to be button number 2, and this is just going to match up with our inventory slots. Matter of fact, let's do this because this might make it a little easier to understand what's happening when we do this. I'm going to start with button 0, and then we'll call this one here button 1. And you'll see why I'm doing this here in a minute. Let's make this button 2, and so forth. So I'm just going to renumber these real quick. I'll be right back when I get them all renumbered. Okay, I've got all the buttons renumbered. I numbered them 0 through 9. There's 10 buttons, and they're in the order that they show up here on the screen. So you notice button 0, and that's because as I added buttons, it just automatically stacked them next to the one that was already there. So it does kind of arrange these in the order that you drop them in. So I've got all my buttons in my inventory panel ready to go. The next thing we want to do now is get these buttons hooked up to our script so that when I add an item to the inventory, I can also update what's in that button, and I can make that a clickable type of thing there. So we're going to just kind of collapse that for now. Canvas is all set up. And what we need to do is go back in and look at that inventory script that we have. And I've already done a little bit of typing in here before. So what I did is I added another array of button type. So I'm going to store that whole, all 10 of those buttons in an array. Just like I'm storing all the game objects for the inventory in a game object array, I'm also making a button array, and I'm making it size 10, so it's the same size as how many spots I've got in my inventory. Now when you go to add buttons in, this is a UI element, so you have to make sure you include this using up here at the top. We want to tell Unity that we now want to make use of all the Unity Engine UI commands. So you want to add that, and then we add this to get our array of buttons. Once you do that and you save it, you can go back into Unity, and now on our skeleton who has that script for the inventory, you'll see that not only do you have an inventory array here that's all initialized and empty, but you have an inventory of buttons. And what we're going to need to do here is drag in the buttons. These are the buttons from my example before. So in yours it'll be empty. Let me just empty those out. You should have the 10 slots, but they'll all be empty. And what we're going to do is we're going to come over to our canvas that we're working in here and open up our panel where our buttons are, and then we're going to drag these buttons into the slots in the inspector. So let's go back to the skeleton. We're going to drag these in. Now whenever you're going back and forth and dragging things in, your inspector is going to keep trying to change. So one thing you can do is up in the top corner here there's a padlock in the inspector. If I click that, that locks the inspector, and now if I click on other things, you notice the inspector does not change off of the skeleton. So now I'm free to come over here and grab button 0 and drop it in here, and we're just going to drop these buttons in here, and I'll be back when I get these done. Okay, I've gotten all the buttons dragged in. You notice element 0 in my array is button 0, and I just kept them in the order that they appear on the screen all the way through element 9. Now here's why I decided to start numbering the buttons at number 0 out here in the panel when I renamed them. It's because they're going to go in an array, and the first element in an array is element 0. So I just decided to make things easy that I would make button 0 the first one in my list, name that with the 0 so that it would match up with this. Also, these buttons 0 through 9 are going to match with our inventory array 0 through 9. So whatever is at element 0 here is going to be displayed right here in element 0 here. So that just kind of helps us to maybe keep that a little bit more straight in our minds as we go through. That's why I kind of numbered them to match how the array numbering goes. So now we have all the setup done here for our inventory buttons. And the next thing we're going to do now is go into our script and add in the code that will cause the sprite of the object that we pick up out here in the scene to be displayed in the correct button out here in the game view. So let's go back into our script. Alright, so here's where we're adding an item. And however you have your interaction system set up is fine. At some point you'll be adding an item to your inventory. And so as review, we just have a bool here to keep track of if we actually were able to add an item or not. We start that out at false. Then we loop through our inventory array, and we're looking for an open spot, the first open spot. If we find a spot that is null, which means it's empty, then we take our item that we sent in, that we're trying to add, and we store it right there in inventory I. Now what we're going to add here is we're going to update our UI, our user interface for our inventory. So we're going to go to inventory buttons, and we're going to do it at the same position. So if there was nothing in our array of inventory and this was 0, that was null, it would add the item to the 0 spot. And we're also going to then want to update the 0 spot in our button array, because that's that very first button. To do that, we're going to just say the array, and we're going to say .image, because a button has an image component. So we're saying go to this button, go to its image, and we're going to override the sprite that's there. So we're going to use this command override sprite, which tells Unity whatever sprite's there, put this in its place. Okay, and what we want to put in is we want the sprite from the item that we just added. So the item, this is the item we're adding. The item has a sprite renderer. Okay, so since we're in a 2D game, they all have sprite renderers. So I'm saying get from the item, get the component sprite renderer, and from the sprite renderer, get me the sprite. This is the sprite that's currently being displayed for the item. So I'm basically just saying take this sprite and make the image in the inventory and the button here match it. Okay, and that's all we really need to do to make that work. So let me go back out here and walk you through it in the Unity side. So what will happen now is when we pick up an item, let's say this key right here. Let's click on the key and let's unlock our inspector so we can see it. The key is a 2D object. It's got a sprite renderer. It's got a sprite, which is the key sprite, which it goes in your project panel. You can see it right here. It's this sprite right here. So this is just a sprite. Okay, that's the key. So when we go up and we pick up the key, it's going to send this whole key game object to our inventory, and then our button here is going to get the sprite renderer's sprite, this key, and it's going to change this white box here to the key sprite, because this white box is just a sprite. We're overriding it. So let's see if we have this all in place to test this out. If I hit play and I walk the skeleton up to the key and I pick it up, you notice that the key goes into the slot here in the array. If I walk up to the potion, again, it's going to, when I pick it up, it's going to find the first empty spot. This one is no longer empty, but this one is, and it will put that there. So if I pick that up, the potion pops right there into my inventory bar. If I was to go back where I could see my my scene view here and my inspector, if I go to the skeleton here, let's look at what happened in the script. So you notice in his inventory he got the key in element 0, he got the potion in element 1. Down here in the inventory buttons, button 0, so let's go to button 0. Button 0 has an override sprite. Now it's not going to show, because we overrode it, it's not updating here, but you notice that it did update it here because I'm overriding this. Okay, so and same thing here with button number 1, we're overriding it. Okay, so one thing we might want to look at here is changing the way that these images are set. You notice the key got kind of squished a little bit when it came in. So there's a couple of different image type modes in the image. So let's stop play mode here for a minute. Let's go to this button here and image type. Let's change this to a simple. And when I do that, that allows me to tell it to preserve the aspect ratio. You notice to change the shape of my image when I changed it to simple. You know, when it's sliced, it's trying to fill the whole square up as best it can, and we're telling it to fill from the center. Now we could take that off, but that will mess things up later. But you've got tiled where you can tile things. You've got filled, which just tries to fill the space as best as it can. But what we want to do here really is either keep it at sliced, and you're going to get some aspect ratio changes. You can fix that by making sure all your sprite images are in a square, the same width and height so that they match up. Or you can switch it to simple. It changes the shape a little bit of your holder spot, but that might be okay. And then if you do preserve aspect, it will keep it from stretching. So for instance, if I go back in now and pick up the key, you notice now the key is not stretched. It actually looks better. And I actually don't mind the other shape that showed up for that image in the simple mode. So just things you can do to kind of tweak that a little bit if you want to. Alright, so now we have looked at how we can set up our inventory here. We can add items to this, and our item will show up here in the graphical inventory so that we can see that we have it. Let's take a look at how we would change our code so when we use an item that it then goes away. So in the scripting we have so far from this little project we've been playing in, we have a way to use this potion here. So in our inventory script, we have this remove item function for getting things out of our inventory. So again, we send the item, we loop through this looking for the item that we're trying to remove. So we're searching for the item. When we find the item, we set it to null, like this. And then we give ourselves a message saying we removed it, and then we break out of the loop. Now before we break out of the loop, let's also go ahead and remove and update the UI. Remove it from our UI so it shows that we no longer have it there. So we'll just say update UI. And again, we know where it is. It's the inventory I. And since we're matching the index numbers up of our inventory and our buttons in the panel, we can use I again. We're just kind of matching those up to make this easy on ourselves and keep things in order. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the inventory buttons array, and we're going to tell it that we want the one that's at the I position. And we're going to, again, we don't want to remove this, but we do want to reset the sprite. So we're going to say, just like we did up here, matter of fact, we can probably do some copy paste. Let's do this. Let's copy this because we know this is kind of what we want to do. We're just putting a different sprite there. So let's just paste that in. So we're going to override that sprite, but we don't want it to equal this now. We want it to equal something else. So what we're going to do right now is try setting it to null and just see what happens. It might just make it disappear altogether. We'll see. Let's save that. Let's go back out into Unity and let's see what happens when I pick up a potion and then I use it. Alright, so here comes our little skeleton. He's going to pick up this potion. It shows up in that slot. And then we put a key in to use the potion. I want to say it's the P key. Let's see. And yes, it was. And when I hit the P key to use that potion, it says down here, potion blue is removed from inventory. And you notice that it just set the sprite back to default. Because we're overriding the sprite, we're actually not getting rid of the one that's there. We're just temporarily kind of swapping it out. So when we remove that one that was on top, it just goes back to the default. So we can just set that equal to null, and that clears out our bar as well as our inventory. If we shrink this down again and look to see what happened in our script, you'll notice that the skeleton now has nothing in his inventory because we used that, and then the button here, it went and updated that as well. So we have gotten all that set, and we should be good to go. Alright, so that's how you can set up a graphical inventory. How you can make, when you pick things up, you can make this image appear up here. When you use it, you can make it go away. Now these are buttons, so you could also add to these buttons a click event to where when you clicked it, it would go to figure out what item is being stored in that slot and see if it can use it. I don't think I'm going to go into that right now because that might be a little more than we want to chew off here in this video. But what you could end up doing is on each of these buttons, stop play mode here, you go into your buttons, on your button you could add a click event here. So for instance, we could say add an on click event, so when this button is clicked it's going to do something, alright? And we would need to have a function that we would call when we clicked it to first of all kind of figure out what this item is, because this could be any item. The way we got this set up is whatever order you pick the items up, that's where they're going to go. So if this is a potion, we could tell it to use the potion. If this was a key, we could tell it to use the key if there was something in range that it could use it on. Things like that. So that's what you would do. You'd add an on-click event and then you'd have to code it. And really in this kind of a system where we have a very open-ended inventory, where you can, maybe we're going to have hundreds of different items in a little RPG game like this, that's going to take a little bit of coding on the backside because each of those items is going to probably do different things. So you're going to have to code them a little bit differently, and that gets a little more complex. It's probably more of an intermediate topic, and we're trying to stick with more beginner topics here. But that's how you can display your items anyway. You know, and you can make them clickable. Alright, I think that's probably enough for this video on adding the functionality of the UI to our canvas. So as always, I hope you found this useful and that you enjoyed it. Go ahead and keep leaving me comments below. I did this video because a viewer had commented that they wanted more on inventory and how to display it on the screen. So I do look at those, and that's how I choose some of the topics that we do. So please feel free to share your ideas and your questions. I'll be happy to get back and answer those for you. Have a great day, and thanks for watching.